Just days after the first anniversary of the January 6th insurrection, the Department of Justice announced that it has formed a new specialized unit to focus primarily on growing threats of domestic terrorism. The DOJ says the new unit will help the FBI investigations into domestic terrorism that have more than doubled since March of 2020. Although DOJ already has a counterterrorism division, the Assistant Attorney General and head of the National Security Division said the new unit will increase the amount of resources.
We've seen a growing threat from those who are motivated by racial animus, as well as those who ascribe to extremist, anti-government, and anti-authority ideologies. I've decided to establish a domestic terrorism unit to augment our existing approach. This group of dedicated attorneys will focus on the domestic terrorism threat, helping to ensure that these cases are handled properly and effectively coordinated across the Department of Justice and across the country.
The news also comes as the Department of Homeland Security released a memo this year on January 6th warning of a rise in online chatter coming from extremist sites. But as a Congressional Research Service report on domestic terrorism and the attack on the Capitol notes, while the participants' actions on January 6th may be consistent with the definition of domestic terrorism, it is important to note that domestic terrorism is not a chargeable offense on its own. There is no federal criminal statute that establishes criminal penalties solely for domestic terrorism, although it may be an element of other federal crimes or provided as an enhancing sentence. In other words, an individual may commit criminal acts that are widely considered domestic terrorism and be prosecuted for criminal acts themselves, but an individual cannot be charged with committing an act of domestic terrorism under current federal law. Joining me now to discuss is the founder of the One People's Project, Daryle Lamont Jenkins. Daryl, what do you make of the DOJ's move to establish a domestic terrorism unit?
Well, there's so much to say about it, to be honest with you. First of all, I hope they're genuine in their concerns. I hope that they aren't spooked the way they were, or rather Department of Homeland Security were in 2009 when they put out a report about domestic extremism, and Sean Hannity and Fox News railed against it to the point that not only did they walk it back, but they also shut down the entire department that was focusing on domestic terrorism. And the next thing you know, we have 7 people killed in 4 separate incidents in 3 months. So that's one concern. The other concern is who is going to be a part of this task force, of this new office, because one of the things that had came out over the past couple of months, I have written about this person, and now the Progressive magazine has written about him. There is someone within the Department of Justice who was in a neo-Nazi band in the late 80s and early 90s, who ended up becoming a Philadelphia police officer, and now he works in domestic counterterrorism for the U.S. Department of Justice today. So we really have to make sure that if this is going to be a genuine effort, we have to make sure that the right people are involved in it. This doesn't sound like the person that should be involved in it, and that generates a lot of concern for me, especially since I know this particular character.
But if that's the case, it should generate a lot of concern for all of us. Let me just help us to understand what the unit is going to do and how many people will be doing it, as best you understand it, because it seems to me that there's a lot that has to be done. Not only do things have to be monitored, like chat rooms and what have you, and correspondence, but in addition to that, there is on-the-ground investigative work that needs to be done. I don't know if that will be done by the FBI. They'll hand it off to the FBI to do that on-the-ground work. But how will they actually do this, tactically?
Well, tactically, I think first and foremost, they're going to have to, I guess they're going to be using the tools that they used while investigating January 6th. I believe that they will definitely investigate those leads that they have received from that day, because a lot of the people that they're going to have to look at in this day and age will probably have their roots not only in January 6th, but also in Charlottesville. It remains to be seen how these things are going to come about. But again, they have to have the right people in there. Otherwise, everything stops before it even starts.
Yeah, but the investigation of January 6th is after the fact, right? So we're hoping that what the counterterrorism group is going to be doing is preventing attacks and domestic terrorism, not just investigating and prosecuting after the fact. So one hopes that happens. Democrats at this hearing yesterday noted that while the DOJ and FBI may say they're investigating January 6th as an act of domestic terrorism, prosecutors are not seeking the longer terrorism-related sentences. In fact, we don't have a legal definition for domestic terrorism in the United States, meaning it's not a federal crime. Is that going to change?
Remains to be seen. It remains to see what those legislators that we have in Washington are going to do. It's going to depend on them. In regards to how they investigate, January 6th is basically was just their foundation. They could use the information that they got from January 6th to prevent future acts of terrorism. Let's be real. January 6th was an act of terrorism. And whether or not domestic terrorism becomes a criminal act on the books, regardless of that, you still have the tools to make sure that something like January 6th never happens again. I am hesitant to say that they are using those tools properly. Hopefully that's what we'll see going forward. Bottom line is the Democrats, basically Joe Biden his poll numbers are in the toilet right now because people feel he isn't doing anything about the threats that we have seen over the past year. Hopefully this is a change in the right direction.
Let's cut right to it. Is the reason that we are not getting any traction on getting domestic terrorism designated as a federal crime because of the kinds of people who generally are engaged in domestic terrorism?
I believe so. They do have a lot of influence in our government. They've been doing this for about 30 years, basically pressuring our elected officials to do things their way, to stop looking at them that way. That's why we saw what happened in 2009 when they put out that report and mentioned right-wing extremists, and Sean Hannity and the Fox News crowd went after it. They believe that they can do no wrong, or at the very least, no one can stop them from doing wrong. Now, if they are going to be serious about fighting domestic terrorism, yes, they're going to have to do that. The legislators or Congress people, anybody who has to put pen to paper and draft a law making domestic terrorism a crime, they have to do that if they want to show everyone that they're going to be serious about it. But the bottom line is people really do need to be held accountable for the heinous things that they're trying to do to us and our democracy. That bottom line.
Daryle Lamont Jenkins, thank you so much for joining us, as always, sir.